at night.
So there's a family of 4 deer, and I walk up and I inject them with the same thing you use to put down a dog that you love. You know, it's painless. Yeah. They just are dead. There's 4 of them. They have no family beyond this, and then I eat those deer. So then there's been no suffering. I would have thought that that's still wrong. I wouldn't want someone to do that to my dog, which is kind of my framework for what.
Yeah, but that's the key point there, is that you wouldn't want someone to do that to your dog, right? I don't think it would be bad for the dog, right? Like,
so that's what I'm saying. The deer aren't owned by a human, so I can. Yeah, so I'm actually okay to sneak around at night like a ninja, euthanize a family of deer as long as I get the whole family, and then eat those deer. Like I do it once a year, and then that deer lasts maybe a year.
That's the thing. Like in practice, you'd have to kind of fulfill so many qualifications that it would be almost impossible to make sure you're actually doing it. In principle, though, because the question you're asking is interesting because of the principle. Like, I wouldn't really have a problem with it. You know, like as far as I'm concerned, if there's no suffering, there's no problem, right? There might be
interesting.
We need to be consistent here. So as I say, like if we think it'd be wrong to do it to a human or other animals like a dog, we should probably think it's wrong to do it to a deer. My own ethical intuitions say that it wouldn't be bad for the person being killed. Potentially the only consideration worth bearing in mind is that it might be in some sense bad for the person who has to do the killing. Like it's kind of, it creates a kind of less than kind of morally, what's the word I'm looking for?
Like some stain, some
character within yourself if you do that action. But like the action in and of itself,
well, why would it create
a stain? Why would
it create a stain if it's not a bad thing to do? And it creates, if bad is only suffering and it causes no suffering, why would it be bad to do?
Why would it create some sort of character defect?
Because I'm causing no suffering.
Oh, because like if it genuinely causes no suffering, then I don't think I can't see any reason to think that it would be like morally impermissible.
Got it. So then let me ask you this one. There's an old man at the end of his life. He's got very little pleasure left to be had. I sneak up on him. I'm a young guy, lots of pleasure. I love the taste of flesh. I inject him painlessly, and then I eat him. He would have survived another 6 months to a year. I get a meal. He didn't miss much pleasure. He was kind of a miserable guy. Is that permissible if conscious awareness of suffering is our only metric?
Well, I think that if it is wrong, it's not wrong because of like it's bad for the person that you've killed. Like I don't think it's bad for the person you've killed. So if it is wrong, which is the question we're exploring, it must be wrong for some other reason. For example, there is a trouble with even the act of saying that this is morally permissible is problematic because of the fact that like if people become aware that this is something that's morally permissible, it's going to cause upset. It's going to cause worry as well for people who are in that situation. It's kind of like, you know how people say you wouldn't kill a person because, you know, it would scare everybody else. It's kind of like a kind of more fundamental version of that, which is to say that, let's say, no, we're going to qualify it such that anytime this happens, we totally make sure that this person genuinely, nobody else knows who they are. Genuinely no family, genuinely nothing like that. And we're going to kill them. Like we might say, yeah, okay, because you've fulfilled all the conditions, it's now okay to do so. Mm-hmm. But the very act of saying that it's okay to do so is going to be problematic, right? So like the act qua the act, like the act in itself might not be on a suffering-based worldview ethically impermissible, but it wouldn't be permissible to grant it the status of permissibility. Mm-hmm. Do you see what I mean? Like in a kind of meta-analysis, although like qua the act, right? In virtue of the act itself, you might, you know, someone like me might be committed to saying, no, it's not wrong. It's not wrong to kill that person. I could say that like to grant it permissibility is itself impermissible. And for that reason, I can't say that it's permissible.
But since animals,
does that make sense?
Yeah. But since animals can't hear English
and worry about that,
then that's not an issue. So as long as you're taking out the entire family
and making sure that there's no suffering
in
of
a
children.
painless way.
Yeah. But then, actually,
because this isn't how I feel, by the way. I
have a different axiom here. I land differently.
I see what the problem.
I'm walking through. I wonder if this is an insufficient view. It's only
insufficient if like you're reasoning in reverse. I mean, what are we trying to do here? Are we trying to find an ethical theory that we think is sound and see what it implies? Or are we saying, well, I've got these ethical beliefs that I want to keep. And so if this ethical theory doesn't abide by it, I'm going to throw it out.
Yep.
That's not how we should do ethics. Like if it turns out that actually it is okay to kill a family of elk or something, then that would just be how it is, right? We can't reject an ethical theory.
I'm the guy that turned
alone,
cosmic skeptic, non-vegan. I did it. I can't believe it. I didn't want to be that guy, but I'm that guy.
Like now somebody who was about to go out and like hunt some deer is actually now going to go and hunt an entire family of deer on my side.
I didn't want to be this guy,
and to your point,
here I am.
Go ahead. Sorry, it's getting skippy.
I think I actually lost you for a second there.
No, I saw you were about to speak.
And you were talking about the hunter taking out a whole family of deer.
Yeah, sorry. I just lost you for a second there. I wasn't just kind of trying to sit staring at you. We have to be careful to stress that in practice, such situations don't really arise. You can never actually know that you've fulfilled all the conditions such that this genuinely isn't causing any suffering, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so in practice, it doesn't, like it's not like I'm saying, yeah, it's fine, go around in the forest and just kind of hunt deer, because of the fact that you're not going to kill them painlessly. It's going to be impossible to do that every single time. You're not going to be sure that they don't have, family or whatever who care about them, et cetera, et cetera. You're never going to actually be able to fill those conditions. But on a kind of matter of ethical principle, we can have this interesting conclusion and potentially like some clickbaity title. Cosmic Skeptic admits that it's okay to eat a deer. Like in principle, but like there are all kinds of, as long as we make the actual conditions correct, pretty much anything we think is immoral could be permissible in some circumstance. We would think that murder is okay in some circumstances. People think that torture is okay in some circumstances. If the only way to find out where the bomb is that's about to explode in Manhattan is to torture the person who set it up, most people would, well, a lot of people at least, would say, yeah, we can torture them, even though generally speaking, like, yeah, if somebody whose campaign was to bring about an end to torture in war or in, whatever it may be, like torture is just something that shouldn't be allowed. If you press them on this and said, yeah, but if the bomb was about to go off in New York City, would you torture the person? And they said, look, if all of these conditions were fulfilled, I think this would be morally permissible. Mm-hmm. Like, I think they're still allowed to say that they're against torture, that torture is wrong, that in practice, we should never torture people. But like in principle, as a point of kind of ethical principle, we can say that there are circumstances in which it might be permissible. Mm-hmm. But in practice, it doesn't really matter, because that's never going to come up.
Sure. And of course, the semantics and the labeling is secondary to the, in my opinion, the behavior and all of that stuff. So you did raise one interesting thing, which you said, what are we doing here? Are we creating principles? And I actually realized that what I am doing, right or wrong, is starting from, I think, my most charitable ethical instinct, and then trying to universalize that, which is a little bit different than what you're doing. You're a little bit more committed to the logical truth, as it were, of ethics. And it's just interesting. And that's I guess why I still land on, look, it's not justifiable necessarily. I can't explain why, but you don't kill people even if it's painless in most situations.
The only thing to bear in mind is that like, if somebody's criticizing you, right? Mm-hmm. If somebody is coming along and saying like, I'm someone who wants to eat meat, right? I don't buy all this vegan stuff. And they start prodding and they start saying, oh, but come on, man. Like, if a deer in the forest, it doesn't feel any pain, et cetera, et cetera. And you're still kind of clinging to this, like, no, it's still wrong. It's always going to be wrong. Like they might think like this person's ethical position isn't fully thought through. Right. Because like like when I talk to people and they say, what if the animal feels no suffering? And I say, well, if there's no suffering, there's no problem. If a cow can't suffer, then you can kill the cow. Sure. Like oftentimes their response is to go, oh, right, fair enough. Actually, yeah, that does make sense then. Yeah, I can see why you'd think this. That makes a lot of sense. And then, the fact that in practice cows do suffer means that they now think my position is consistent.
Yep.
And cows do suffer, so I should probably stop killing them. Whereas if I were to go, no, even if cows couldn't suffer, you still shouldn't kill them because, they're a cow or whatever, or because for some kind of reason that I couldn't really actually justify, they would be in their rights to say, so your position is kind of grounded on nothing. It doesn't actually have any consistency. I'm not going to give you the time of day, right? So we have to actually be honest about the limits of our ethical position here. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's in most circumstances, in pretty much any circumstance that you're ever actually going to practically find yourself in, it will be wrong to kill this animal unnecessarily.
Well, I think
like to say that there's never an exception is to be myopic about it.
Oh, I think the difference is I had previously held this position that I don't really know how I feel about, which is that in addition to, you don't want to cause suffering. There's also the sense of, sure, when I murder someone, they don't know that they've been murdered. But if they were given the choice, they would have chosen to live. And so is it immoral to take something's life knowing that they would have chosen to live, whether that's a human who's old, a family of deer? And so if that
there's one big problem with that. Mm-hmm. There's one really big problem with that, as far as I can see. You know, that you might have a response, but if we're talking in terms of conditionals, right? Because we're essentially saying, like, this person doesn't exist anymore, right? They don't exist, so there's nothing that can be true of them. But we're saying, but like, if they did exist, you know, in the possible world in which they do exist, they would prefer to live.
No,
and that gives me an obligation not to kill them.
The moment before I killed them, they wanted to live, and I overruled that desire.
So that's slightly different, although there is still a problem, which is that we're now kind of trying to ground ethics in desire fulfillment, right? And the question is it harmful to a person to have their desires go unfulfilled if they're not aware that those desires have gone unfulfilled? Like, the person before they die want to continue living, and that desire they have is violated. But if they don't know the desire is violated, is it bad for them? And there are a few ways to explore this question. For example, there is imagine that you're on a train, right? And you meet a stranger on the train who's sat next to you on the train, and you just strike up a conversation, and it turns out that they've got a very dangerous operation happening next week. And, you know, there's a 20% chance that it's going to kill them. It's going to be horrible and painful and tragic. And you think to yourself, damn, like, I want this person's operation to go well. Like, I care about this person, right? And they get off the train. You never got their name. You're never going to hear from them again. No way to contact them. But you have this very real desire that their operation goes well, right? Now, let's say that their operation goes horribly. They die in a horrible accident. It's horribly painful. The question is that bad for you? Right? Your desire has gone unfulfilled. It's been violated, right? Like, you had this desire that this person has a successful operation. They didn't, but you will never, ever know that that's the case. Is it bad for you that their operation went wrong?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's I would say my initial response, having not thought about it too deeply, is that no, it is not bad for you. And it seems that what this thought process does is it separates the desirer from the person who suffered the death.
Well, it's interesting.
Yeah, what it shows is that, like, it's not just about kind of having the desire kind of violated that's bad. It's you have to, like, be aware that your desire has not been fulfilled. So if someone has a desire to continue living before they die, and then they die, they're not aware that that desire has gone unfulfilled. So in the same way that it's not bad for the person on the train, because their desire has gone unfulfilled, but they don't know about it. Well, the person who wanted not to die isn't aware that their desire goes unfulfilled when they die. And so it can't be bad for them either.
You know, it's interesting because I don't think you'll think this is bad. If you already eat slaughterhouse meat, this ethic will take you closer to being a vegan. As someone who doesn't at the moment eat mammals, it's taken me further from vegan, because now we've identified a condition in which it's okay. Mm-hmm. But that's not bad.
No, it's not
what
bad.
You're saying, because
it's
basically what you're saying is, if you came over and I was eating venison, you would be like, okay, if this was because you killed an entire family in their sleep with a knife to the throat, then I guess I'll have some too. And then the two of us could eat venison together.
In practice, I would stress that in practice, like, that those conditions probably wouldn't be fulfilled, such that I'd be like, actually, yeah, I mean, that was a fine thing to do. But like, you're right. But I'll just remind you and remind your listeners that the definition of veganism is a minimization to the highest extent practicable of all forms of animal suffering. Mm-hmm. So what that means is that, if you're kind of not causing suffering to an animal, then what you're doing isn't non-vegan, because veganism is about minimizing suffering.
Got it.
So if you're killing an animal that genuinely doesn't suffer from it, then you couldn't be like, well, this is moving me away from veganism because, you know, I can kill this animal now. No, it's not. Because killing that animal in that circumstance would be a vegan thing to do, because veganism is about suffering. And if that animal can't suffer, then it's not non-vegan to kill them, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't think you are actually moving away from veganism. I think you're just kind of beginning to
redefine veganism.
More like refine, in a more refined sense, understand what I mean when I say vegan.
Cool. Would you eat eggs? If there was just animals that were laying eggs in the wild and the eggs couldn't turn into babies?
Well, if they were just laying them and we were literally just kind of like, if we happen across them in the forest or something.
Yeah, we're like on a walk and we just find it.
Yeah, like absolutely. Okay, I don't see a problem with that. I've got it's really funny. I made a TikTok not long ago about backyard chicken farming, because people were like, what's the problem with having chickens in my backyard? And I basically said, look, it still matters where you got the chickens from, because you probably bought them from like a breeder. They're still probably laying way more eggs than they would do naturally in the wild. So it's very painful for them. So you shouldn't be breeding them and exploiting them for that purpose. You should probably feed the eggs back to them to replenish the nutrients, which is what sanctuaries tend to do. I then at the end said, but look, like if you've got these chickens, you're not breeding them, and your principal reason for holding them is to look after them. It's not like your principal reason is eating the eggs and you happen to look after them. Your principal reason is looking after them. You feed their eggs back to them to replenish the nutrients. But it's also the case that you are just going to have some eggs that go spare, because these eggs are going to be hatched. These eggs are going to be produced, and they're just going to be there. And you're already feeding the other eggs back to the chicken and whatever. Like, then yeah, I can't see why it would be wrong to eat them, right?
Interesting.
Can I ask? Of course, there's an argument to say that, like, but there's an argument to say that, like, sorry, did you say something?
Yeah, sorry. I have one question of clarification. Is you mentioned a moment of intention, which is your principal reason for having them. Is that actually important? Like, what if my principal reason is to get the eggs, but I fulfill all the other conditions from a consequentialist standpoint? I give them the eggs, I do all of that other stuff. Is the reason important?
It's wrong. Yeah, it's wrong for like second order reasons, which is to say, like, it's not kind of wrong in itself, so to speak. But if your intention is not the welfare of the animal primarily, then you're more likely to kind of accidentally, abuse that, or you're more likely to kind of miss when you're doing something that's harming them without realizing it. Right.
Got it.
If your primary intention is the care of the animal, then that's what's important. So what I said was that, like, so long as, like, the only qualifier is that if you do eat that egg, you might be like normalizing the idea that it's okay to eat eggs. That might have an effect in terms of the image you're promoting or whatever. For indirect reasons, it might still be a bad idea to eat the egg. But the actual act of eating that egg is not immoral. Of course it's not, right? And I said this on a TikTok, and like I was getting responses from people online saying, this guy isn't an ally of the animals. He's this disgusting animal exploiter, abuser. And I was looking at them thinking, my God, like, do you not understand that if our position isn't actually ethically consistent, nobody's going to take it seriously? Of course, there is nothing wrong if you're walking through the forest and, like, like a pregnant cow was being fed on by its calf, and the calf spat out some of the milk and it just happens to be laying on the floor, and you scoop it up and shove it down your gullet. Of course, that's not immoral. Like, come on, like let's be real, So yeah, to answer your question, like, in those circumstances, like, it's not wrong. The thing that's wrong isn't eating an animal product or eating an animal or eating a bit of meat. The thing that's wrong is causing the suffering. Right? Yep. It's not the act of eating the egg or even the act of eating the flesh. It's the process by which that was brought about. It's the fact that you have to kill an animal to bring it about. It's the fact that you have to cause suffering to an animal to get eggs from the egg industry. That's why you don't eat the eggs. It's not because eating the egg in and of itself is an immoral thing to do,
Yep. Yeah, I think that what I'm going to noodle on, because this is fresh to me and I need time to sit on it, is, should suffering, defined as you did as a conscious experience of that, be my sole ethical coordinator, or am I justified and unable to articulate whatever else is in there? And even if it's not, is it still a good thing for me just to hold on to these, like, ghosts of ethical reasons that perhaps make me behave in a kinder way?
You just have to beware that anything that you do identify other than suffering that you think might be irrelevant, just make sure that it doesn't actually technically just break down to suffering,
Yep.
Because that's one of the mistakes that people often make. They talk about, like, how, no, they were like, I like to consider virtue. I like to consider, rights, because rights seem to conflict with consequentialism. Because, if you have a right to life, then, if it happens that it's going to cause less suffering to kill this person, like, if you want to believe in rights, then consequentialism doesn't work. But you'll actually realize that maybe, like, the reason we have rights in the first place is ultimately to avoid suffering in the long run.
Yep.
Something like that. You have to make sure that it doesn't just break down suffering, because you might want to say, okay, I care about suffering and I care about human rights, but maybe human rights are actually just grounded in suffering in the first place, right? So you've got to be careful that that's not what's happening.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is a good little moral pickle for me to
I'm excited too. I'm going to look up what mammals don't attach to families. What mammals, if killed solo, have no family.
Or just go on walks in the woods looking for eggs.
I thought about like opening up a restaurant on the side of a busy road and just kind of waiting to find out what the special of the day was going to be.
There you go.
When the roadkill
special
is hit. You know, there are maybe ways around this. But I think that the key thing to take home is that, like, you know, is that final point that when we say eating meat is wrong, that's not what we mean. Mm-hmm. Eating meat is wrong is a proxy for saying causing unnecessary harm to an animal is wrong.
Yeah.
But, you know, if every single animal in the world died right now instantly, such that there were going to be no more generations, because there can't be, because there's no one to breed them, like, and we were just left with a bunch of dead carcasses, would it be wrong to eat those carcasses? No, of course it wouldn't be, because it wouldn't be harming any animals at that point. Mm-hmm. It's like, the product is already there.
Yep.
The reason you shouldn't eat it isn't just because it's a piece of meat. It's because by buying it, you're paying for this to continue. You're demanding economically that it happen again. That's what's wrong. The act itself is not what's wrong.
Hope that you guys enjoyed that clip. If you want to see more like this and have us do more podcasts, we are 100% funded by our generous patrons. And if you'd like to contribute, there's a link in the description, and we'll have one pop up on the screen right here so that we can do more podcasts where we have fun conversations and hopefully some deep ones like this. Either way, hope that you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.